My parents agreed to co-sign a loan, but stuck me with the debt. I quietly opened a separate bank account. 2 years later, my dad yelled over the phone, "Son, what the? The bank is suing us. What were you thinking?" I put my name on those papers on a Tuesday afternoon in March, not really thinking much about it at the time. My name's Mark, 24 years old, just out of college with a business degree and settling into my first real job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized company, pulling in 42 grand a year. Not exactly rolling in cash, but it covered my bills well enough. That morning my parents had called, and I could hear something in my dad's voice, the tone he used whenever they needed a favor. "Mark, can you stop by after work? There's something important we've got to talk about." I drove over, and when I walked into the kitchen, Thomas was sitting at the table with a stack of documents spread out in front of him. "What's going on?" I asked, and he said they needed my help. They were trying to get a loan for home repairs. The roof was shot, and the foundation had cracks running through it. I glanced at the paperwork. A loan application. $35,000. "The thing is," Linda explained, "their credit wasn't looking so great after last year's medical bills. The bank told them they needed a cosigner." "A cosigner?" I repeated, and Thomas jumped in quickly, saying it was just a formality, that they just needed someone with good credit to vouch for them. "You've got a clean record, you just graduated, everything looks good on your end." I asked what cosigning actually meant, and he said that if somehow they couldn't pay, though they insisted they would, then I'd be responsible. But they said that wouldn't happen because they'd never missed a payment. That wasn't completely true. I remembered late notices, stressed conversations about money, but still, they were my parents. They'd raised me, sent me to college. I hesitated. "I don't know, Dad. $35,000 is a lot." Linda's voice got soft. "Mark, we wouldn't be asking if we had any other choice. The roof's leaking and the water damage keeps getting worse." I asked if they could get the loan without dragging me into it, and Thomas shook his head, saying the interest rate would be brutal, 18%, but with my credit it would drop to 7%, saving them thousands. I should have said no. Should have slowed down and asked more questions. But I was 24, and they were my parents. So I said, "Okay, where do I sign?" The relief on their faces hit immediately. I scribbled my signature 4 times and initialed 3 more. Linda hugged me and thanked me, saying I had no idea how much I was helping. "It's just a signature," I joked. But it wasn't just a signature. 3 months later, my phone rang from some number I didn't recognize. "Is this Mark Thompson?" "Yeah, who's calling?" "This is Kelly from First National Bank. I'm following up on the loan ending in 4782. You're listed as the cosigner. We haven't received payment in 2 months." My stomach dropped. "My parents haven't been paying?" "The account is 63 days past due," she said. "As cosigner, you're fully responsible. If the balance isn't brought up to date in 30 days, it'll go to collections and hit your credit." I called Thomas right away. "Hey, Mark, what's up?" He said. "The bank called." I told him. "You're 2 months behind on the loan." Silence. Then he muttered, "Oh, yeah, we had some unexpected bills. We'll catch up." "Dad, they said it's going to collections. This hits my credit. We'll get it sorted out. Don't worry." "When?" "Soon. We're on it." Then he hung up. 2 weeks later, the bank called again. "Mr. Thompson, we still haven't received payment. The account is now 77 days past due. We need a payment arrangement." I asked how much, and she said $2,416 in missed payments and late fees. I barely brought home $2,300 a month after taxes, covering that would wipe out almost everything I had. I called my parents, and Linda picked up. "Mom, the bank needs $2,400. They're sending it to collections. We're trying, money's just really tight right now. But this affects my credit," I said. "Well, can you cover it?" she asked. "Just this once. We'll pay you back." I told her I didn't have $2,000. "You've got a job," she said. "Mark, we raised you. We paid for your college. This is important." The guilt hit hard. I checked my savings. $2,800. My entire emergency fund. I transferred $2,500 and called the bank to make the payment. That left me with $300 to my name. The banker said that brought the account current, and going forward the monthly payment would be $817. $800? I called Thomas again. "I just paid $2,500. "Oh, thank you. We'll pay you back. The monthly payment is $817. Can you handle that?" Yeah, we've got it. Just a rough patch." I wanted to believe him. But 34 days later, the bank called again. They'd missed another payment. Can you cover? Dad texted. We'll pay you back. And for the next 6 months, I did. Every month. $817. They kept promising they'd pay me back, saying they just needed to catch up on other bills, laying guilt on thick about family loyalty. That payment left me with almost nothing. I lived on ramen, stopped going out, canceled every subscription I had. Meanwhile, on Facebook I saw Thomas showing off a new TV. Then photos from a week-long trip to Florida. Linda's nails freshly done every couple of weeks. They couldn't afford $800 for the loan, but they could afford a vacation. In the 7th month, I couldn't make rent. My landlord threatened eviction. I called Linda. I can't keep doing this. I missed rent because I'm paying for your loan. We appreciate it, she said. Then pay your own loan, I snapped. Money's tight. You went to Florida last month. That was for family, she said. Aunt Ellen was sick. You bought a new TV. The old one broke. What were we supposed to do? Pay your loan, the one you promised to handle. Don't use that tone with me, she said sharply. We're your parents. We sacrificed for you. And now you're going to abandon us? I hung up and stared at my bank account. $312 until my next paycheck. Rent overdue. Loan payment coming in 8 days. I couldn't keep living like this. That night, I started researching, reading stories about cosigners getting burned, adult kids drowning in debt because of their parents. I found forum posts, hundreds of people dealing with the same mess. One comment hit me hard. Stop paying from the account they can see. They'll keep draining you. Protect yourself first. Protect yourself first. The next morning, I went to a different bank and opened a new checking account, one my parents knew nothing about. Up until then, I'd still been using the old account from high school, the joint account Linda opened when I was 16 for emergencies. I'd never closed it, never thought about the fact that she still had full access as a joint owner. I pulled up my statement. When I scrolled through the transactions from the last 6 months, I started noticing withdrawals I didn't recognize. $50 here, $100 there, sometimes even $200. I went back further and realized it had been happening for more than a year. Little amounts I'd assumed were my own random spending weren't mine at all. They were my parents, pulling money out of my account while I was the one covering their loan and struggling to pay my rent. I moved every dollar I had into the new account and left about $10 in the old one. Then I called Thomas. Mark, hey, he answered. Did you know Linda's been taking money out of my account? I asked. Silence followed. The joint account from high school, I continued. She's been withdrawing cash. Thomas finally said it was for groceries when things were tight. For a year? I snapped. While I've been paying your loan. We raised you in that house, he said defensively. That's family money. No, I said, it's my money. From my job. Mark, don't be dramatic, he muttered. I told him I'd moved everything to a new account they couldn't access, and that I was done paying their loan. What? You can't do that. I just did, I told him. Mark, you're on that loan, he said. If you stop paying, your credit tanks. It's already wrecking my life, I told him. If I stop paying, then you'll have to start. It's your loan, your house, your responsibility. I hung up, shaking, wondering what I'd just done, but at the same time I felt like I could breathe for the first time in 7 months. The first 3 days after I quit paying were strangely quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting my phone to blow up, or for Thomas to show up at my place, or for Linda to call crying. But nothing happened. Maybe they were scrambling to figure things out. Maybe they'd finally started covering their own payments. On day 4, Linda finally called. Mark, honey, we need to talk. Okay, I said carefully. She told me she and Thomas were deeply hurt by what I'd done, moving my money without warning them, accusing them of stealing. I told her it wasn't an accusation. She had been taking money from my account without asking. She said that account was hers too, that we'd opened it together when I was 16, that it was supposed to be for emergencies, not for groceries while I was paying their loan. I told her. We're family, she insisted. Family helps each other. I said I'd already helped, for 7 months, and covered $8,100 on a loan I didn't take out. She said they appreciated that, but cutting them off entirely was cruel. I said I couldn't do it anymore, that I was missing rent, eating ramen every day, and running on empty. She fired back that they raised me, fed me, clothed me for 18 years, and now that they needed help, I was turning my back. The guilt kicked in automatically, the way it always had, but I forced myself to push through it. I'm not turning my back, I told her. I'm setting a boundary. Pay your own loan. She said they couldn't afford it right now. I reminded her about Florida. She said that trip was already paid for and non-refundable. I mentioned the new TV. She snapped that she wasn't going to justify every purchase to me because they were the parents and I was the child. I'm 24, I said. You're still our child, she replied. And children respect their parents. I took a breath and told her I loved her, but I couldn't keep paying their bills. Then I guess we know where we stand, she said, and hung up. It felt like a punch to the gut. 2 days later, Thomas called. Mark, we need to figure this out. Okay, I said. He told me the bank had called. They needed a payment, and he didn't have it. That's not my problem anymore, I told him. Yes, it is, he argued. You're still on the loan. If we don't pay, your credit takes a hit too. I told him I knew, but I couldn't keep paying. He asked if I could just cover this month to buy them some time. Dad, I've been covering it for 7 months. 1 more month, he begged. That's all we need. No, I said. Silence. Then he told me that when my credit tanks and I can't get a car loan or rent an apartment, I should remember this was my choice. I told him it was his choice to take out a loan he couldn't afford. He said they did it for the house I grew up in, a roof over my head. I told him I never asked for that loan. He snapped that I was ungrateful, that they gave me everything and this was how I repaid them. And he hung up. I sat there shaking, angry and guilty and confused. Was I wrong? Was I being selfish? I called my friend Jason, who'd been my college roommate and never sugarcoated anything. Hey man, what's going on? He asked. I told him everything. The co-signing, the payments, the joint account, the fights. Dude, he said when I finished. Your parents are financially abusing you. That sounded harsh. Is it? He asked. They pressured you into co-signing, stopped paying, guilt you into covering it, took money from your account without asking, and then made you feel guilty for setting boundaries. That's financial abuse. They're my parents, I said. I know, he replied, but parents can be abusive too. What they're doing isn't okay. I asked what I should do, and he told me to protect myself. Keep the new account, don't let them near it, and whatever I do, don't pay that loan again. I worried about my credit, and he said it would recover, that it was a hit, but not a permanent one. The pattern my parents were creating, that was permanent. If I paid again, I'd be telling them they could keep doing this forever. After we hung up, I sat with that. Financial abuse. The words felt too big, too dramatic. But when I looked at my statements, at months of payments I couldn't afford, at withdrawals I never approved, maybe Jason was right. By week 2, the bank started calling again. I let every call go to voicemail. Mr. Thompson, this is Kelly from First National. The account is now 45 days past due. We need to discuss payment arrangements. Please call us at, I didn't call. In week 3, I got a certified letter full of legal wording about default and collections. My hands shook reading it, knowing it was all real and happening. But still, I didn't pay. In week 4, Linda texted me saying they were threatening to sue and begging me to make just one payment. I stared at her message for 20 minutes, then blocked her number and blocked Thomas's too. I couldn't get dragged back in. That same week, something else happened. My new bank called. Mr. Thompson, this is Ryan from Account Services, he said. Someone just came in trying to access your account. My stomach dropped. What? Who? A woman claiming to be Linda Thompson, he said. She told us she was your mother and needed to make a deposit. We explained that only account holders can access the account. She got really upset, and I asked the bank rep if he'd given her any information. He said, no sir, we're strict about privacy, but he wanted me to know in case it was some kind of fraud situation. I told him it wasn't fraud, that Linda really was my mother, but she didn't have any permission to access my account. Understood, he said, and added a note to my file making it clear that only I could touch that account from now on. When I hung up, I felt strangely violated. She'd actually tried to get into the one account I'd opened to protect myself from them. I sent her a text from a blocked number, stay away from my bank account. She never replied. 2 days later, I came home from work and found my apartment door unlocked. My heart dropped as I pushed it open and called out. Linda was sitting on my couch. How did you get in here? I asked, and she held up the spare key I'd given her when I first moved in, the one I'd asked her to keep for emergencies. She said this was an emergency, that she and Thomas needed to talk. I stayed by the door and told her she had 5 minutes. She told me the bank was threatening to sue, that if they didn't pay by the end of the month, they'd face legal action, lose their credit, maybe the house. Then pay the loan, I said. She said they couldn't. I pointed out they somehow had money for vacations and new TVs, but not for the payment, and she said I was being unfair and taking everything out of context. Then I asked what the context was for trying to access my new bank account, and she looked away before admitting she just wanted to see if I had money to help. By pretending to the bank you were me? I asked, and she insisted she hadn't lied. She was my mother. I told her that didn't give her the right to go into my accounts. She begged me to help one more time, promising they'd figure everything out afterward. I reminded her she'd said the same thing 7 months earlier. She told me this time was different. I asked how, and she said that if I didn't help, they'd lose everything. I really looked at her then, crying, makeup smeared, hair messy, and some part of me wanted to fold again, to fix everything like usual. But I knew if I did, we'd be back in the same place in 30 days, and then again 30 days after that. I told her I was sorry, but I couldn't do it. Can't or won't? She asked. Both, I said. She stood up, said then we're done here, and when I said her name, she cut me off. You've made your choice, she said. You picked money over family. I hope you can live with that. She set my spare key on the table and told me I wouldn't be needing it anymore since I'd made it clear they weren't welcome in my life. Then she walked out. I stood there staring at that key, feeling like the worst son on the planet, and also like I'd finally done the only thing that could save me. By the second month of me not paying, everything escalated. Another letter from the bank showed up, this one full of talk about lawyers and wage garnishment and lawsuits. My credit score started to tank. I checked it constantly, watching it slide from 720 to 680 to 650, and every drop felt like failure, but I still didn't pay. Then the calls started coming from family members, my aunt, my uncle, cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all saying the same thing. Your parents need your help. How can you abandon them? I stopped answering calls from anyone with my last name. My work suffered too. I missed deadlines, forgot meetings, lost track of tasks, and my boss pulled me aside to ask what was going on. Family stuff, I said, trying to sound calm. He told me to take time off if I needed it. I told him I was fine, even though I definitely wasn't. By the third month, it got even worse. A process server knocked on my door, asked if I was Mark Thompson, and handed me paperwork. I'd been served. The documents said First National Bank was suing Thomas, Linda, and me for the full balance of the loan, plus fees, plus interest, plus legal costs. $42,000. I called a lawyer for a free consultation and explained everything. He asked if I'd co-signed. When I said yes, he told me that meant the bank could legally hold me just as responsible as my parents, maybe even more so if I had the only steady income. I asked what options I had, and he said I could pay the debt or let it go to judgment and face potential wage garnishment. I asked if I could sue my parents. He said I could try, but family court was messy, expensive, and I'd need proof they'd acted in bad faith. I told him they'd lied and said they'd pay, and he asked if I had it in writing. When I said no, he told me then it was just my word against theirs. After the call, I sat in my car in the garage and cried. I felt completely trapped. If I didn't pay, they'd take money right out of my checks. If I did pay, I'd be broke for years. And my parents, well, they had nothing to take. No assets, no savings, no real wages. The bank would come after me because I was the only one with anything. I'd co-signed trying to help them, and now I was the one paying for their decisions. That night, I made a choice. I wasn't going to pay voluntarily anymore. If they wanted my money, they'd have to take it by force. I'd already spent 7 months bleeding my savings, and all it earned me was debt and a family turning against me. So whatever the system took, it took, and I'd rebuild from whatever was left. It didn't feel like quitting, it felt like survival. The court date was set 6 weeks out, June 15th, a Wednesday. I didn't hire a lawyer. I couldn't afford one. The consultation made it clear I'd signed the papers, and the law would treat me as liable. All I could do was wait. 2 weeks after I was served, Thomas called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking. Mark, it's Dad, he said. Don't hang up. He said we needed to discuss the lawsuit, that they'd been served too, and that we needed to present a united front. I actually laughed. A united front? You mean where I pay and you benefit? He said we were family and should deal with this together. I reminded him we stopped being a team the moment they stopped paying and expected me to cover it. Mark, don't be dramatic, he said. Dramatic? I fired back. I'd paid more than $8,000 on a loan I didn't even take out. And when I set a boundary, Everyone acted like I'd betrayed them. "We didn't ask you to pay," he said. "Yes, you did. Every time you sent those texts saying, 'Can you cover just this once?' you were asking me to step in. It absolutely meant something. And if it didn't, then explain why Linda tried to get into my new bank account, or why she let herself into my apartment." He didn't answer, and that silence told me everything. I hung up. 3 weeks before court, the bank reached out with a settlement. "Mr. Thompson, this is Ryan Shun from First National," he said, explaining they'd rather avoid a trial. If I could pay a lump sum, they'd settle for $25,000 instead of $38,000. $25,000. I had maybe $3,000 to my name. I told him I didn't have that kind of money. He asked if I had assets, maybe a car or retirement savings. I told him I was 24 and barely starting out. He suggested I talk to my parents. I told him no. Then he said if the case went to court, I could be on the hook for more than $40,000 with fees and interest, and gave me 2 weeks to respond. I sat down and did the math. My car was worth about $8,000. My 401k maybe $2,500 after penalties. That still left $15,000 I didn't have. I could wipe myself out completely or wait for judgment. I called Jason. They offered $25,000. I told him. He asked if I even had that. I told him only if I sold everything. "Then don't do it," he said. "You're 24. This is bad, but it's not the end of your life. If you drain everything now, you'll have nothing left to rebuild with, and your parents will learn they can drag you down again." He was right. I let the deadline pass without calling the bank back. The weekend before court, my uncle called. "Mark, the house is gone. The bank is foreclosing." "That's not my problem," I said. He asked how I could say that about my own parents. I told him they took out a loan and didn't pay. It was on them. He said they were going to be homeless, and I said maybe they shouldn't have gone to Florida or bought a new TV. "You co-signed," he reminded me. "You agreed to be responsible." I said I co-signed because they lied. He hung up. When court day arrived, the courtroom was small and washed out with fluorescent light. My parents stood there with a lawyer. No clue where they got the money for that. They didn't look at me. The bank's lawyer walked through everything: the loan terms, the payment history, the default letters. Their lawyer argued they were dealing with financial hardship. Then the judge turned to me. "Mr. Thompson, you're the co-signer. Why'd you stop paying?" I told him I simply couldn't afford it anymore, that I'd been paying $800 a month for a debt I didn't take out and had missed my own rent. He asked if I'd told the primary borrowers, and I said yes, repeatedly, and they'd promised to pay, but never did. The judge sighed, looking exhausted, and ruled in favor of the bank for $41,800. All three of us were jointly and severally liable. My parents' attorney started to protest, but the judge cut him off and added a payment plan, $600 a month, split however we wanted. If payments weren't made, the bank could garnish wages. Clear? We nodded. Court adjourned. Outside, Linda walked up to me and said, "Mark, we need to talk about how to divide these payments." I told her no. She insisted we needed a plan, and I told her she could make whatever plan she wanted. I'd deal with whatever got garnished from my paycheck, and beyond that, I was finished. "So you're letting us struggle?" she said. I told her they'd let me struggle for 7 months. Then I walked away. 2 weeks later, the garnishment started, $400 a month taken right out of my paycheck. My parents had filed a financial hardship claim, so they were supposed to pay $200 while the bank pulled $400 from me. Even with a court order, I still ended up paying more. My new math became $2,300 minus $400, leaving $1,900 to live on. Tight, but doable. And compared to before, it felt almost peaceful. A month later, Linda texted from some new number saying they couldn't afford their share and asking if I could cover the full $600. I blocked it. 3 months later, I got another notice. My parents had defaulted on their $200 portion. The bank was now taking the full $600 from me. I called to ask why, and they said my parents hadn't paid. So per the court order, they could collect everything from any defendant with wages. "You have income," they told me. They don't. "So I'm paying for all three of us?" I asked. "Correct," they said. I hung up and laughed. Of course I was. But here was the weird part. $600 a month was still less than the $800 I'd been paying voluntarily. And without my parents calling or guilting me or showing up at my door, the whole thing felt lighter. The bank just took the money. They couldn't drag me into arguments because I had no choice. In a strange way, that judgment freed me. I wasn't choosing to pay anymore. I was being forced to, and that made it survivable. 6 months into the garnishment, I got promoted to senior coordinator, 5,000 more a year. My boss told me I'd been doing excellent work despite whatever was going on in my personal life. That extra $400 a month after taxes changed everything. I could save again. Buy groceries without counting every penny. Replace old shoes. The garnishment still sucked, but I was living around it instead of being buried under it. Around month 8, my cousin Emily messaged me on Facebook. "Hey Mark, I heard about everything. I think you did the right thing." She said her mom called me selfish, but she remembered when I was paying my parents' bills and barely eating. She wanted me to know she supported me. Someone in my family actually understood. We started talking more. She'd moved 3 states away to get out from under the constant guilt trips. "They don't change," she said. "They'll always want you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. The only way to make it is to stop letting them." I told her I felt guilty all the time. She said guilt was just their programming and I could unlearn it. "It takes time," she told me, "but you can uninstall it." Around month 10, I got a letter in Linda's handwriting. "Mark, we lost the house. The bank foreclosed last month. We're in a rental now. Your father picked up a second job. I'm working at a grocery store. We're barely hanging on. I don't expect forgiveness or help. I just wanted you to know. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times. They'd lost the house, the thing they'd used to guilt me for months. I didn't write back. A full year passed. I'd paid $7,200 and the loan balance had dropped to $34,000, but I was keeping my head above water. I rebuilt my emergency fund, started adding to my 401k again, and moved into a better apartment. My life wasn't perfect, but it actually felt like mine. Around month 14, Thomas called. He asked me to just listen. He said I'd been right, that they never should have asked me to co-sign, never should have stopped paying, never should have guilt me for setting boundaries. He said they lost the house, that he was working 2 jobs, that Linda cried almost every night, and that he finally understood what I'd been trying to tell them. He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness, just admitting he'd been wrong and was sorry. I thanked him and asked if they were doing okay. He said they were managing. "Take care of yourself, Mark," he told me. Something inside me shifted, not forgiveness exactly, but maybe some kind of understanding. By month 18, the garnishment dropped to $400 again, and suddenly I could save even more. My credit climbed to 640. I started thinking about buying a place, a little condo, something small. By year 3, I did it. A 1-bedroom, nothing fancy, but it was mine, and the mortgage was cheaper than rent. I sent a picture to Emily. Did it. Finally became an actual adult. I didn't say anything to my parents. This part of my life wasn't about them anymore. By month 40, the bank called. "Mr. Thompson, your loan has been satisfied. Final payment processed." What? I honestly thought I still had another year left, but the bank rep explained that the primary borrowers had made a lump sum payment, $20,000, and the account was officially closed. My parents had actually paid it off. About an hour later, Thomas called and told me the bank should have reached out already, that they'd paid off the loan themselves. I asked him why, and he said it was because I'd been right all along, that it was their debt and not mine, and that I'd carried the burden for 3 years, 3 years too many. He told me he and Linda had sold belongings, taken out a small personal loan, worked extra hours, and slowly saved every bit they could. It took 2 years, he said, but they finally did it. "Thank you," he told me. "You're welcome," I said. "Take care, Mark." 3 years. Nearly $7,500 gone through garnishment. Another $8,000 before that. Over 15 grand poured into a loan I'd never wanted in the first place. But it was done now. A week later, I got a letter in Linda's handwriting. "Mark, Mark, Mark." She wrote that she'd been in therapy for 6 months, learning about boundaries and financial abuse and the damage they'd caused. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, she said, but she wanted me to know she understood now. If I ever wanted to talk, she'd be there, and if I didn't, she'd respect that too. Love, Mom. I slid the letter into a drawer. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. 6 months after that, Emily came to visit my condo. As she was leaving, she hugged me tight and said, "You made it." I told her I had. She asked if I was planning to talk to my parents, and I said I wasn't sure. Maybe someday, but not yet. She said that was fair, that I got to decide if and when. After she left, I stood out on my balcony looking at the city lights. 3 years earlier, I'd felt like I was suffocating. Now I owned a home. I had savings. I had room to breathe. My credit score was back up to 680 and climbing. Things with my parents were complicated and probably always would be, but I'd learned something important. You can't burn yourself down just to keep someone else warm. You can't keep sacrificing yourself for people who don't value it. You can't give guilt the steering wheel of your life. Sometimes surviving means letting other people face the consequences they created, even when those people are your own family. I went inside and locked the door to my place, my space. And for the first time in years, I breathed easy. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally understood that my life was mine, and no amount of guilt was going to take that away again.